Well, good afternoon. It looks like we're going to spend lunchtime together today. My name is Robin Tow, and I manage the Professional Services Consulting Division at Nextech. And today we're going to spend the next 30 to 45 minutes just focusing on how effective is your marketing. So a lot of times when I work with practices or my team works with practices, we'll talk about marketing because that would be the next level of advancing your practice or growing your practice. And we find most often that practices don't truly have a good plan, nor do they really understand where they should reinvest based upon their previous marketing efforts. So today we're going to not talk about necessarily how to market, but things that you should consider when you're designing your marketing plan. So first of all, what we want to consider is three areas in your effectiveness. You want to know your market, first of all, know what's going on. This year with COVID, we've seen a lot of change in marketing. Some of it has shifted to a format that's a bit better, and in other ways, we've seen, some regression in the market and how we do things. But it's good to know your market. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. We're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is data. Data enrichment is key in understanding your marketing effectiveness, how you put it in, how you use it, how you understand next steps. And then we're going to talk about a few KPIs that will help measure your success and where you should think about using your data to focus on that. So let's get started. When we think about marketing, we have to understand what is marketing feed in our practice. So a lot of practices have a clear understanding of this. They're very savvy in understanding what they're trying to do, and some practices have their own marketing expert within the practice. And there are a lot of people out there in the industry that spend a lot of time talking about how to market your website, how to market your practice, how to further define your marketing efforts. Today, we're not going to focus so much on that. But what I do want to draw to your attention is that marketing is supposed to deliver or help you build patient acquisitions. So those new patients that come into your practice. So how does your marketing support that? And then your marketing materials should also support how you convert those acquisitions into patients, convert them not just into maybe a procedure, but also into nextly your long-term patient, which is the retention piece of this. So those three pillars are acquisition, conversion, and retention. And marketing efforts should always support that from beginning to end. So let's first think about marketing has to consistently shift and match. The patient journey is continuously evolving. It's changing based upon different demographics. It's changing based upon different, ages, generations, the differences in those, the region where you're trying to market. Those all are changing and they shift slightly, but you need to make sure that you're measuring that, understanding that, so that your marketing efforts match that shift. So first of all, with marketing, what is a very important thing to do is first understand your marketing channels. Now that may be a very common term to some of you. Others may find that this is just a new term, but at the end of it, I would challenge you, make a list of all the areas where you feel that you invest or you have true marketing efforts. So do you do social media? Do you have a platform that you consistently focus on? Do you do any type of paid searches? Do you have, specific content that you use within your practice to market yourself? Maybe it's a brochure. Business cards are actually a form of marketing. How are you focusing on your existing patients so that you drive new patients into your practice? Referring physicians, and then also obviously your email marketing. A lot of people will think of the website as one of the primary marketing channels. Obviously, that is one to add to the list. But at the end of it, you need to clearly understand your marketing channels, because we commonly think about just the cost of the lead or maybe the cost of the conversion, but in effect, it really is ultimately about the entire cost to get that patient, not just one or the other, but everything that is involved in getting that patient into the practice and retaining that patient. So with knowing your market, we're going to talk about a few things that you should think about when you know your market. But here's a fun fact. Many of you may already understand this, but that genre or age 18 to 24 has already been seen to have a shift in where they choose their providers. So providers that are very digitally savvy, that offer a digital experience, meaning you're up on online scheduling and telehealth, and you're using a patient portal effectively, and then you're using, texting for your confirmations, but you've got that digital platform and you're consistently keeping it up to date and evolving it. That generation is focused on it. That's what they want. And so what we find, and this is, definitely a study that's been put in place to measure this, but what they have found is that age tends to move away from a practice because of the digital piece. They're not concerned as much about a physician's credentials or how good they are. They're more interested in how well you position yourself in that digital arena and what you offer to them as a patient. So in knowing your market, let's talk about the internet. So a few facts here. So 36% of consumers use the internet to research health concerns. Now that is one thing that I know makes a physician completely unnerved, simply because they're the ones that went to medical school. They're the ones that should be diagnosing and assessing and creating a plan for a patient, and not the internet. I don't recall that the internet actually got an MD. And what we find is that the internet, the content can be done by anybody. So validating it is a big problem. But what that should say to you is that you need to make sure if people are out there using the internet, you need a presence on the internet. So your website is a perfect example of that. Another thing that was very important for me to understand, and it was crazy when I looked at this, I'm thinking 66% of my older generation, so the 55 to 64-year-old generation, looks at online medical recommendations. So we're talking about that generation that in the past didn't even have the internet. They weren't using the web to research physicians. They're the ones that went to their PCP or their OBGYN and they said, who would you go to for plastic surgery? Who do you think is a great dermatologist? You know what? I need to go get my eyes looked at. Who do you think I should go to? Now they're going to the internet and they're looking at the rating websites. That's a little frightening to me, because now what we're saying is that a physician's credentials, their training, their results are not necessarily what drives a patient to choose them. So now that customer experience is critical, because the patients that don't have a good experience leave the practice and then they post ratings out there on the internet for other patients to see. Very strong consideration for how you handle the customer experience. In knowing your market, you should also recognize trends. So here's a trend that I've seen grow this year. It isn't new this year, it's just grown more this year, and that's online scheduling. So ask yourself, do I really need to shy away from it, or should I be offering it? A lot of practices will tell myself or my team, I don't really want to do that. I'm frightened of what they'll do. I don't have control of the schedule anymore. I like to be able to double book. I like to be able to see where I put patients because I know I can fit them in different places. That's great. Online scheduling shouldn't replace that. It should augment that. It should support it. But in effect, what it does is it provides another avenue for your patients to reach out to you to ensure that they're seeing you, or even new patients are gaining access to you by creating an appointment. And this gives that patient the opportunity after 6 p.m. to schedule an appointment. Think about it. How often, during the day do you think, okay, I need to call and schedule to see my dentist, or I need to go get my hair done? And then at the end of the day, they're closed, you forgot to call, and you've now missed another opportunity to call them, and you're frustrated because you need to get these things done. Whereas that online experience to schedule basically solves that problem. So think about where that fits into your practice. And honestly, the practices that are engaging with this and using this, I'm finding a lot of success in their scheduling, and they're able to fill spots on their schedule that may have gone unfilled in the past. So in recognizing your market, understanding it, you need to also think about contactless. So that's a growing trend. That is something that we've definitively seen this year. COVID has changed how we interact with our patients, and there is the talk that there might be some shutdowns again, a little frightening there, but are you prepared? Have you taken the opportunity from the first wave of this pandemic to really gear up and get yourself ready for something that might happen again or might not? So have you managed to get everything in line with access for scheduling online, or access to their patient paperwork, completing the portal, being able to do prescription refills? all of the things that help you remain more contactless, that reduces the risk of exposure, not only for yourself as a practice, but also for your patients. So in knowing your market, we also have to recognize that the customer experience is evolving and changing. As I said a few minutes ago, the customer experience is definitely paramount in how we drive our marketing these days. It definitely plays a role in it. But what was interesting is that telemedicine, which is the new trend this year, not something new to medicine, but definitely very high in the marketing this year. What we need to understand is that Forrester Research is saying that it's in hyperdrive, so to speak, and that we're looking at topping over 1 billion in telemedicine visits by the end of the year. And I think it's probably going to surpass that based upon the shift in where we might see that there's another outbreak and shutdown, so to speak. All right, and knowing your market, you need to understand where your patients are coming from so that you can know where to reinvest and or, put more effort into making that a better experience for the patients. So obviously we know Instagram is a great social platform, but one of the things that was noted is that it had a huge emphasis on health and well-being, and their focus in 2020 was to really gear up into that arena, which you didn't necessarily see as much. It was more for an advertising effect. Now they're starting to gear into more of that health and well-being focus. Video, very, very popular. A lot of people will use video as a means of educating themselves, researching where they might want to travel, researching how they want to do something, and they also use it to research practices and understand procedures. They want more insight into it. So how is that procedure done? What happens during my consultation? And those short, quick snippet videos position you well and help not just market you, but also credential you to your patients or your future prospect patients. All right, let's move on. Knowing your market is one thing, but now let's talk about data. And data is one of my favorite subjects. People that have worked with me understand that I clearly place a great emphasis on this in a practice. Data is foundational to so much that you use in marketing, as well as other things. It tells you so much, or it can tell you so much if you use it correctly. So data with respect to marketing should help you maximize your returns because you understand, critically what it's doing in real time. So it helps you look at all of your channels and maximize what you can get from it. Data should also help you drive your costs down because you understand, where to reinvest. Did that channel work? Did that particular piece work? Did that effort work? Do I need to reinvest in that? Do I need to shift my marketing dollars elsewhere? And then finally, it should help you make better decisions about your cost management. So using your data can give you more access to understanding where you should not only reinvest, but how you should manage things potentially within your practice, where it might be more training needs to be in play, or you need to add more systems to manage things in your practice. But those are the things that understanding your data should do for you. All right, so one of the things that we do know is that the top 3 lead resources on a national average are patients, referring physicians, and the internet. And so with that, we can see the data, we see what it does, but what you need to understand is, what does that mean to you? All right, so if you focused on just one of those, referring physicians, but think about what that means. If one of your top referral sources is referring physicians and you as a practice do not place any focus on that, what would that cost you? So if I look at that, and it might mean $250,000 to my practice, maybe even $500,000 to my practice annually. And generally, when I look at that piece of the marketing, I'll note that there's generally a top 5 physicians that really generate that revenue for you. They feed that part of your practice well. Well, what would that mean to you if you just lost one? That revenue loss could equal 50,000, 100,000. It just depends. But generally what I find is that loss may be equivalent to, a relationship that hasn't been managed well. You haven't really helped that practice send patients easily to you. You haven't made it easy for them to communicate with you. Or maybe there's someone in your practice that just is not good at maintaining a relationship. And so that physician or that practice that refers to you has gone elsewhere because they were able to get a better experience for their patients. Because remember, those referring physicians rely on you to provide a great experience to their patients, because that's part of what they need to continue to foster and grow and maintain their patients within their practice. So I pick referring physicians because it's oftentimes the one that we kind of put on remote and we let it automatically kind of do its thing because it just happens automatically. But that is where we tend to kind of miss the boat on this, because it can be where we have the biggest loss sometimes. The other thing that will help you understand here is you might find that there's new referring physicians that you need to cultivate as well. So something to consider as you're looking at your primary lead sources is don't ignore the ones that you think are just an autopilot. All right. When we look at data, we have to understand where's our data coming from. So yes, I'm going to say garbage in, garbage out. Everybody knows that, term. They're very familiar with it. But the other thing is, well, where do I pull my data? How do I know where to look at it that's the most reliable? So generally within your software, you've got 3 places for your data: scheduling, EMR, and the financials. So I'll ask the question. I know that this is, obviously not a live format, but what would you consider to be the primary or the top place for you to get data that's the most reliable? I'll let you think about that there for a second. So let's talk about this. So when a patient schedules an appointment, they schedule an appointment for Botox, but yet when they come in, they end up having Botox and a filler. So is my schedule now the primary source of data for me? Does it have the most accurate information? No, it doesn't. So the schedule is very important to giving you a sense or source of data, but it's not going to be the best source for most of your data. EMR should be a really excellent source for you, but I oftentimes find that there's almost too much information in there for you to use what you need or pare it down. I also find that sometimes it's just not documented as well as it should be. But when you get to the financial piece, I find that people generally want to make sure they're paid, and they want to make sure that the income's coming in the door. So they tend to pay a special close attention to that area. So while the appointment may have been scheduled for X, the financials will truly represent what happened in that appointment. So financials are generally your best source to pull data, to recognize shifts, changes, understand your costs, etc. And beyond that, you can actually glean into not just cosmetic, but you can do a lot of your medical marketing and data pulls as well. All right. With your data, one thing that you want to make sure you can do is do target marketing. So yes, I can pull a list of all my patients that have Botox, but can I pull a list of all my patients that have Botox that have not come back in X number of days? So I'm looking at 2 different filters here. I'm not looking at just one. So it helps me manage it to a different level. So you want to be able to not just pull the data, but then measure it against something. So maybe perhaps I want to look at all of my injectable patients that have come in for one service, but have never done another service in the practice. Or maybe I want to look at all my patients that during checkout never really were sold a product or didn't buy sunscreen, or what percentage of them do. So those are things that you can use with your data that help you target where you want to place an emphasis on your next marketing efforts. All right, so one of the things that we want to do is we know our market, we understand data, we understand it's important how we put it in, we understand how we get it out. Now we need to know what we should measure to understand the effectiveness of marketing. There's a lot of reports that you can get out of the software, and we look at reports sometimes and wonder how accurate it is. Again, that goes back to how you put the data in, but let's talk about just a few key KPIs, so to speak, that you can actually put in place in your practice to help you understand effectiveness. How well is your marketing supporting the end result of what your practice is trying to do? So first, conversion rate is a very common one in a practice, a cosmetic practice especially. So this is where you're tracking those leads and those consults that come in that convert to a procedure or to a surgery. So tracking that is not just holistically tracking it overall in the practice. You should think of it more about tracking a procedure. Does one procedure convert better than another procedure? You can also track conversions based upon how long things take to convert. You can also track the conversion of particular providers who converts better. So there's a lot of different ways to look at conversion and not just look at it as I converted a patient that was a lead or a consult into a procedure. You want to drill down. You want to understand, do I convert my cosmetic patients that are coming in for injectables better than my surgery patients? Okay, so if I recognize that, then that is helpful information to understand where I might need to improve different areas of my practice so that my marketing is more effective, or I can grow that area of my practice. All right, let's talk about retention rate. So you pay to get the patient in. Everybody should understand or recognize that it costs more to get a new patient than to retain an existing patient. So efforts in retaining patients are part of your marketing efforts. So you want to measure that. You want to understand how many patients I'm retaining and what my churn is. Am I losing patients? And why am I losing my patients? So you want to track the number of patients at the beginning of a period, whether it's 2019, and of those patients in 2019, how many came back in 2020? And then you can basically track retention again, like conversion, across many spectrums. So your retention can be based upon the referral source. Do I retain my patients better that come from my physicians, or do I retain my patients better that come from the internet? You can also look at your retention by provider, by location, by procedure. All of those things should and can help support future marketing, as well as help you improve processes within your practice. Remember, it's one thing to define a metric. It's another thing to take the results of that metric and do something about it. Improvement on processes, improvement in my marketing, improvement in what my staff are doing. Those are the things that you should really take away from this. It's not just gaining the data and looking at it, you got to do something about it. All right, a third one is the average encounter value. So per encounter, per patient encounter, what is the value of that? And again, this is the type of thing that you can track various different ways. So those of you that work for a practice that has surgery, primarily cosmetic surgery, or maybe those of you that are on the call might be more ophthalmology based and you do cataract surgeries, you want to separate your values out so that you're not looking at the average encounter value holistically across all appointments. You want to segment them into two parts. There's the office encounter value, and then there's the surgery encounter value. Because if you blend those two together, it's going to skew what that looks like to you, and it won't be as valuable to you. So you definitely want to divide those up. And it's simply just looking at the total number of medical office visits or cosmetic office visits, and then you divide that up by the number of appointments that are just office visits, and that will give you an average encounter value. And then the same with surgery. And why is this important? Well, because you can look at it per provider and what they generate. Well, if I look at this and then I recognize that a provider is going to be out, then I can project losses. I can project what it's going to take to make up that loss in income because I've got a provider that's out. Because I already know what they're averaging. What does that mean? It also helps your providers understand what their time is valued at, and what it means when they give up that time, when they shift their schedule, when they want to be out. It helps you understand better what that financial impact is on the practice. All right, and then the last one is the cost per lead. What does it cost me every time I have a lead come into my practice? Or whether or not they come in or not, just that they've contacted the practice. They've reached out, they've called the practice, they've sent an email inquiry in, that's a lead. Then what I need to understand is, what does that lead cost me? And that cost is going to vary based upon whether or not they convert. So if I have 500 leads from a specific marketing source and none of them convert, then that entire expense for every lead is very high. But as my leads convert into patients that generate revenue, then my cost per lead is going to decrease based upon my spend. So again, important to understand that so that I can go back and recognize, where do I reinvest my marketing dollars? So those are all very helpful things to track, and definitely something as we're coming to the end, the home stretch in 2019 or 2020. Completely forgot the year. And then we're moving into 2021. These are some of those KPIs that you should start to think about putting in place and track them throughout 2021. And then use that information to see where you might go next. All right, finally, success really comes from due diligence in many ways. So first, a key takeaway is data management. So manage how it's being put in. Go back and look at how your staff are entering the information and ensure that it's going in such a format that it will support what you're trying to report on. And a lot of times I know that permissions help control and they help enforce the way data is put in. So I would encourage you to go back and look at the system setup, ensure that that's in. And then there are tools in the software and NextTech that you can use to help clean up data. So if you find that you're looking at your data and you're uncertain as to what's right, what's wrong, reach out to the support team. You can send emails to myself or my team, and we can help point you in the right direction with respect to some cleanup tools. We're even happy to have you reach out to the client success manager, and we can do a mini health check and just kind of go through and do like a 10-point check and give you an overview of the things in your system that you might want to work on that we're finding where the data it's not succinct and it's not measuring up to what we think it would be. Training. It's critical that you consistently make sure your staff are entering data correctly. And you only know that if you're looking at the systems, looking at the data. So make sure your data is being entered correctly, make sure your staff are trained to do it correctly. And then follow through with checking on them. Shifts happen, staff change, processes evolve, and you need to make sure you're checking on those processes to ensure they're still being followed correctly so that the data is being managed. So reporting, accountability protocols, all of those will help you better manage, and then hopefully you'll have a much better outcome, and then you'll have the reports that you understand, you use, and recognize where your marketing efforts and your effectiveness really is. All right, I know this was a shorter webinar, but now we have time for questions. So let's see if we have questions out here. Okay, I have a question here. For practices using NextTech, how do we get training on how to specifically pull these reports? So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. There's the good, better, best plan, so to speak. So there are going to be webinars on the patient or the community portal. I know that's not what everybody loves to hear, the do-it-yourself kind of thing. That is definitely an option. You can reach out to your client success manager and we can set up a mini health check. Those are complimentary, and that is something where the consultant can give you a validation so that you know that the reports are yielding what they need to or not. And then the consultants can definitely share reports with you so that you can, understand that these are the best reports to use. Or you can purchase, consulting time, and that would be another way to do it. So you've got some different options there where we can help you get going on understanding where your data is coming from in the best reports. So what's the best method to capture patient email addresses to import directly into third-party software like Constant Contact? Okay, well, the first is making it a requirement in the system. So when you enter a new patient, I would make it a requirement. It is, however, the one field in the new patient screen that your staff can mark as declined. And when they mark it as declined, it obviously means that, they don't have an email address that they want to either give you, or they just don't have one. But I often find that people don't know that that's an option. And so they'll put a fake email address in there, or, just something in that field to get past it. And then we have a lot of garbage data. The second thing is that there's a preference in NextTech that will help you validate that it is truly an email address. It does not mean it's accurate, but it'll look for things like .com, .me, .info to ensure that it's a true email address. It'll look for an @ symbol as well. And then exporting to Constant Contact is very easy. you can go into the letter rating module in NextTech and you can pull a filter of all your patients with email addresses. You can actually add additional filters onto that are patients that have opted out to give you permission to use for marketing. And then you can export that as a CSV into a file that you just upload into Constant Contact. I do it all the time. And in fact, Tara, if you want to email me, I will send you a how-to on it. Is this webinar available to show to certain staff members? Absolutely. So you've attended, you've signed up for it. NextTech will be sending you a link so that you can review this at your leisure and you can share with your staff. So I find converting to Excel for monthly cumbersome. Any suggestions? Yeah, Crystal's not always pretty when you export it. So it depends on what you're trying to report on, but enterprise reporting does a beautiful job of two things. Well, actually three things. So enterprise reporting will give you a much cleaner export into Excel. It gives you customization, so you can build your own reports. And finally, and I did this just this week for a practice, you can set up what's called a subscription service. So one of the practices I was working with, they wanted their patient coordinators to see what they had generated each day, and they are divided up into non-surgical and surgical. So I basically created a report for them that each day had no patient information, would email to that specific coordinator exactly what they generated in totals for that day based upon categories assigned to charges. And so again, Crystal's not pretty, but I do still use all of the reports in NextTech, and I build dashboards in Excel. And yes, there's some cumbersome components, but if you want a cleaner format or you want to use some different reporting methods that allow you to build, then I would look into our enterprise reporting. All right. Okay. My contact information, it's R as in Romeo, dot, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, O as in Oscar, H as in Henry at nexttech.com. So it's r.ntoh at nexttech.com. So there you go. And I'm sure that they'll send it out in the follow-up. What is the minimum addressable data, phone, email address, to input a prospect in NextTech? Good question. So you get to decide what that is. There's required fields that you can set up in NextTech, and you can decide how many fields you want required. My best practices philosophy is this. If the patient won't give you enough information to go in as a prospect, then I put them in as an inquiry. So you may or may not be aware that in the new patient window, there's a button called inquiry on the top right, and it lets you put in just a lead. So like a website lead that all you have is a first name and email and what they were interested in. And so NextTech will let you put that in with no required fields. It's got very minimal reporting, but it does let you run conversions from inquiries to prospects or inquiries to consults. The second nice thing that it does is that it will allow you to recognize that there's an inquiry that is now recontacted the practice that's now going in as a lead. So for instance, I might go into the website and put in my first name, my email, and ask a question about a procedure I'm interested in. As a practice, my due diligence would be that I would take that information and I would put it in as an inquiry into NextTech to know that, okay, there's a new person that's interested, but they didn't give me enough information to truly be a prospect. But then I pick up the phone and call the practice 3 days later. NextTech will recognize fields like my email address, and specifically email usually, and it'll say, it looks like this person that you're creating as a new prospect in NextTech might also be in here already as an inquiry. So it'll prompt you to look at that, assess it, and then convert it, and then you'll have a conversion. But generally as a prospect, I look at the first name, last name, date of birth, zip code, and email. Phone number, cell phone number is nice, but not everybody wants to give us that anymore. But if they want to be text, then generally I do try to get that. I don't try to get addresses anymore. The reason I ask for zip code is because the patient portal requires a zip code and a date of birth. Otherwise, I wouldn't even ask for the zip code, because most of the time we rely on email and phone number these days as a form of communication. All right, would you recommend to explore third-party solutions such as RedSpot or Patient Pop to increase patient retention and acquisition? I would. I like the lead management that they offer. They're both partners with Nextech. They both offer different things. RedSpot has a long list of things that they offer, including online scheduling. They do help you with some lead management. And the goal is that you can understand conversions a bit better, because they're going to be able to connect to Nextech through the API or the data exchange, so you can better understand where your leads are coming from. So I do like what they offer. I think that what you have to do as a practice is make a list of make your wish list of what you would like to be able to do with respect to managing your patient acquisition piece and your patient retention piece. And then from there, I would set up meetings with all of the vendors that Nextech partners with and see who meets your needs the most across their platform. All right, I think I've answered all the questions. Okay. All right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye, and you will receive an email that will follow up with you and give you access to this presentation. You have my email address, and since it's a smaller attendance today, I'm happy to be able to email you back, and just don't expect a response in 24 hours. It's going to take me 1 to 2 days usually. Thank you again, and we look forward to hopefully engaging with you in the future.